How's it going, guys? In today's video, we're going to be going over how we can use core data to create this calorie tracking app in SwiftUI. And it's going to look like this. So this is actually from a couple of days ago. As you can see here, 4 days ago, I ate some cereal, hummus, and so on. But the app is pretty much going to keep track of that. And it's also going to tell you how much you ate today. So far we ate nothing today, but that's about to change because I just ate a big lasagna. And that's going to be about, let's say, 900 calories. And when you add it to the list, it's going to also add it to the current calories today. And you can also decide to remove it, or you can go ahead and also edit them all together. And most importantly, in case you make some sort of error, you can go ahead and edit it. So this can be changed to something higher, such as that, or this can also be called chicken, for example. And we can submit it, and it will take us back to the screen where we started initially, and it will add it to the total. And of course, we can go ahead and add one more, such as apples, and these are very fat apples, so it will be 420 calories. And when you add that, it will add it to the total today. And yeah, that's essentially all we'll be going over. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also remove things such as big breakfast. We can just get rid of that. And we can go ahead and restart this app to show you that the data will persist. So this app was called Sample Core Data. And when we reopen it, there's going to be apples, chicken, and the rest of them from 4 days ago. Yeah, so practically I'll be showing you how to create this app using core data. So the very first thing you want to do is go ahead and create a new empty project. So go over New, Project, and in here, click on App under the iOS section, click on Next. We're going to call it iCalories. Of course, you can call it whatever you like. Make sure SwiftUI is chosen and that the language is set to Swift. And you do not need to tick the Use Core Data box because we're going to be going over it from scratch to make things much easier. Then go ahead and click on Next, specify a project location and click on Create. Then just make sure to close this sidebar and make sure that your emulator is actually working and change it to an iPhone 13 or to an iPhone of your choice. It doesn't change anything, but just make sure everything loads correctly. Perfect. So the very first thing we're going to do is take care of our data model. So inside the iCalories package, you can just right click and create a new folder. So just tap on New Group and we're going to call this one Data Model. Just like that, and we can actually place that under the ContentView, and inside here you can just hold Command plus N and it will allow you to create a new file. And for this example we need to create a data model file, so just type in data model and it's going to pop up like this, and click on Next, and we're going to call this one a food model because it's going to take some sort of food and then we will take the calories from each food that we insert. So go ahead and click on Create, and you're going to get this very interesting looking tab, and it's empty at the moment because we have to add an entity. So go ahead and click on that and you're going to get this page over here. Now let's go ahead and add the attributes of the food, and they're quite self-explanatory once you see them. This is all based on SQLite, so if you know SQLite, all of this will seem very familiar. But the very first thing we want to get is the calories, and we're going to store that as a double. Then we want to go ahead and give it a date so we can tell when we made an entry. And funny enough, they have a special kind called date in here. So go ahead and click on date. Then we want to give it an ID for each food, so it's unique, of type UUID. And finally, we want to give each food a name. And this is going to be quite simple, and it's going to be of type string. And you can add more fields if you want. This is just how you create the fields that you want to store the values for. And I'm also going to ask you to open the sidebar because there's a lot of good stuff in there. For example, in name, we can also decide to choose a default string. In case there's nothing there, we just type in something such as a default food. And we can also just turn that into banana. And you can also decide whether something's optional or not. And as you can see, there are so many things you can do here. But for this tutorial, we're just going to stick to the default value. And we're going to do the same thing for the date. So double click on date. Oh, okay, it's a bit funky. So click on date until you get this window over here. And we're going to pick a default date. It doesn't really matter what you put. I'm just going to put it 1 year back So let's go 2021. And that will conclude our data class. Although it would also be nice to rename this entity to something a bit more descriptive. So let's go ahead and change that to food. But that's actually going to be the last time we use the sidebar in this project. So go ahead and close that so we have a lot more space to work with our project. And the next thing we'll do is right click on our data model and click new file, because inside that we want to insert a Swift file. And it's going to be called DataController. So this is going to load the data, change the data, and save the data. And we're going to click on create. Now inside here, we need to go ahead and import core data. And it's going to be a class of DataController, just as we named it earlier. And it's going to conform to the observable object protocol. And the first thing we want to do is create a container. And this is going to be an NS persistent container with the name of our model, which is the food model, spelled exactly the same way as over here. And make sure you insert name, or else it doesn't know what we're doing. So the container is just the model itself, essentially, where all the values are stored and so on. So we need to have this so we can persist more data. But this also requires an initializer. So let's go ahead and insert an initializer, which will load the persistent store. So container.load persistent stores, so we can get the data back. And let's delete that part because we're going to create a closure. And the closure is going to give us a description and an error, so we can understand what went wrong if something went wrong. So if let error equal error, then we're just going to go ahead and print failed to load the data. And here we'll add some interpolation and print the error.localized description, so we get something a bit more specific. And it might seem crazy, but that's actually all it takes to load the data. But now let's go ahead and add also the other methods, the ones that are going to save and add and edit the food. So the very first one we're going to add is the save function, because this is the most important, because if we cannot save the data, then there's no point, because all the data is going to disappear. So we want to make sure first that we can actually save the data. Then we can worry about adding food and editing food. So here we're going to type in function save, which is going to take a context of type NS managed object context. Now inside here, we're going to create a do and catch block. So here we go ahead and type in try context.save, which is the context of our data model, which is the database itself. And we're going to print data saved. Woohoo! Because we're super excited that it saved. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and catch and print that we could not save the data. So in general, you'd want to add something in there that tells the user that something went wrong and he could not save the data. And generally, this would be a reason such as there's not enough storage space on the device. But that's actually all we need to save data. And now let's go ahead and add the functions that add food and edit food. So function add food, which is going to take a name of a food followed by the calories. And I spelled that a bit weird. Calories as a double. And it's also going to require a context. And all of these are going to require the same context because we want to make sure we're handling the same database. And here we go ahead and type in let food equal food with the context of context. And the food.id is going to equal a new UUID because we're adding a food. This is a completely new food. The food date is also going to be a completely new date. And in Swift, it's simple as just typing date to get the most recent date and time. Then the food.name is going to equal name, and the food.calories is going to equal the calories. And the reason we created this save function is to simplify this part right here. So save context with context. Otherwise, you would have to copy and paste this in many different places, and that's kind of sloppy. And now the edit food function is going to be very similar. So go ahead and type in function edit food, and it's going to be a food of type food, a name of type string, and this is the one we want to replace it with, and the calories of type double. And again, we need the context of type ns_managed_object_context. So inside here, we want to reinitialize the date. So food.date is going to equal a new date so that whatever item we're editing goes back to the top as the most recently edited item. Food.name is going to equal the new name, and food.calories is going to equal calories. Then of course we want to save everything once again, which is very important, otherwise the changes will not persist. And you guys probably noticed I spelled dull, and we're just going to change that back to double. Now we actually have to go to the top level of our app. So go ahead and click on your app name. And inside here, we need to inject our database so it can be used throughout the project. So here we have to create @state_object, private var DataController, and we just created this. So all the hard work is done. And that's going to equal a DataController. And to inject it in the environment, just type in environment. And inside here, it's /.managed_object_context, DataController.container.context, or .viewContext. And that will take care of injecting it into our app so we can use it everywhere. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and right click on our iCalories folder and create a new group. And this one's going to be called views because we want to insert some views in there. And just while we're here, we're going to create one more folder, which is going to be called helpers. And we'll get to that soon. But for now, go ahead and drag the content view into the views, and let's put the iCalories at the very top. Now click on views and hold Command+N because we need to create a new SwiftUI view. Then go ahead and click on next, and we're going to call this one the AddFoodView. So this will just be responsible for adding a new food, taking the input from the user, so that we can actually add it to our list. And it's good to get this one out of the way immediately. So let's get started by minimizing the sidebar a bit. And the first thing we have to do is take care of the @environment variable, so @environment. And the very first is the one we'll be using everywhere, which is the managed object context. So managed object context. And we're just going to call that managed object context, like that. Then we also have to go ahead and type in environment, and we'll take those spaces back, /.dismiss, and we're going to call it dismiss. And dismiss is just going to take care of closing the current view we're in, so when we click on submit, it will take us directly back to our main navigation view. And then we should go ahead and create two state variables. So @state private var name, which is the name of the food, and @state private var calories, which will be initially set to 0, or you can initially set it to 200, whatever you want your default calorie count to be for the food. Inside the body, we're going to go ahead and add a form and a section. And the first thing we want to add is a text field with the display text of food name when it's empty. And the text is going to be bound to the name. Then we want to go ahead and create a VStack, and inside the VStack we're going to add text of calories /, and we want to get the integer value of the calories. And we also want to add a slider with the value set to the calories in 0 to 1000. And you can change that to 2000 to 3000 depending on how big you think the meals are going to be. And we don't want it to be so specific, so we're going to type in step 10. So it's going to increment by 10 each time we use the slider. And do not forget the colon here. And it's also giving an error because we need to make this a floating point, and it doesn't want to initialize it as one because right now it's an integer. So we need to go ahead and explicitly say it's either a float or a double. And once you do that, you're going to notice that we're also going to get a slider. And you can actually use this slider. It's going to reflect on the calories over there. So far so good. Now we just need the submit button. So right below the VStack, which we will also add some padding to, we're going to go ahead and add an HStack. And it's going to take a spacer, and we're going to use 2 of these. So let's create another one so we can center the button. And inside here we'll type in button, submit, and now we can finally use our DataController method. So here we type in DataController and we need to instantiate that .addFood. Now inside here we enter the name for the name, the calories for the calories, and as the context we have to enter this managed object context. And also when we click this button we want to dismiss the current view, so go ahead and call dismiss. And that's going to take care of our add view. Next we're going to go ahead and go to our helper folder, right click and type in new file. And we can click on Swift file, click on next. And we're going to call this time formatting because we're going to be using this to calculate the time since something happened. You're going to insert a date and it's going to tell us how much time has passed since that happened. And we're going to need this later. So let's create it here. And we're just going to type in function calc time since, which is going to take a date of type date and return a string. Then we're going to let the minutes equal the integer of minus date or negative date and time interval since now divided by 60. So that's going to get the minutes, and then let the hours equal minutes divided by 60 and let the days equal hours divided by 24. Because initially this is going to return to us milliseconds, which is an incredibly large number. So we need to continuously divide that to get the time unit we want. So inside here, we're going to type in if minutes is less than 120, then we're going to go ahead and return \minutes minutes ago. Else if minutes are more than or equal to 120 and the hours are less than 48, then we're going to return \hours ago. And it's much easier if you make sure there's 48 hours, because once it goes to the day, we want to make sure there's at least 2 days to keep it grammatically correct. Because what we're going to return in here is \days ago. And it takes an extra step, of course, to make it so that this is plural in case there's only 1 day. But a very sloppy and quick workaround is to make sure you always have multiples so that it's not grammatically incorrect in the end. The only exception we have here so far is that once it's 1 minute, it's going to say 1 minute ago. And you're going to have to fix that yourself. Just for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to leave it as is. But with that being done, we can go to our content view and actually get started with adding some good code that we can see on the emulator. But we can close this sidebar so we have some more space, and we have an error somewhere. So the project still compiles perfectly, which means we're doing great so far. Now the first thing we have to do inside the content view is go ahead and import core data again, and we're going to have to create our environment object. So environment \managed object context as earlier, and we want the full one, and that's going to be a variable the same as before, managed object context. And you can name this whatever you want. You can make it shorter, you can make it longer, but just make sure you can use it and remember it later. Then to get our data from the database, we have to go ahead and create a fetch request. So they have an annotation for this, which is called fetch request. And inside here, there are a bunch of parameters, which I will go over. And the first one we really care about are the sort descriptors. This will tell us how we want to retrieve our data, in which order, and how it should sort it. So sort descriptor, and that's going to be an array of sort descriptors. And the only one we're going to be using here is a sort descriptor, which is going to take the date from our array of data, and it's going to sort it by date. And the order of that is going to be reversed. And it's also very important you write sort descriptors, because that's the one provided and not just sort descriptor. But with this sort descriptor, once again, it's going to get everything by the date. It's going to order it in reverse, which means we're going to get the most recent date on our list, not the oldest one. And this is going to return an array of fetched results. So here we're going to create var food, because once again, this is just a type annotation, which means we need to create a variable. And that's going to be of fetched results, if I can spell that, fetched results of type food. And that's all it takes to retrieve the data from the database. And that's going to happen automatically when we run the application. Then we need to go ahead and create an add state private var of showing AddView, because that's going to be a pop-up sheet that we want to use. And it's going to be set initially to false. Now inside here, we need to go ahead and create a navigation view, just like that. And we want to have a VStack inside with the alignment of dot leading. And we want to provide a navigation title, dot navigation title of iCalories. So you can go ahead and run the application just to make sure that everything's working correctly. And what you should see is a navigation bar and nothing else. But let's go ahead and continue. And inside the VStack, we're going to go ahead and add a text. And we need to add some string interpolation. And inside here, it's going to be the integer of the total calories today, which is going to be a function that we're going to create very shortly. And that's going to have kcal of today, because once again, we need to get all of the calories that we've registered today, and we have to insert it into our text view. So right below the body, we're going to type in private function total calories today, and that's going to return a double. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and return 0.0. So the program is happy and does not give us any more errors. But we have to fix this later. Then we want to go ahead and give this a foreground color of gray and a padding of dot horizontal. So if you go ahead and run this in the emulator, you're going to see that we're going to get this right here. But shortly it's going to be pushed up by a list. So it's going to be right next to the iCalories. So the next thing to do is to go ahead and create this list. So it is a list, and inside here we need to type in for each, and it's going to be for each food. And we do not have to add an identifier because we already made a data model that has an identifier. If you recall, we inserted an ID of UUID. So that just simplifies the for each loop for us. So for each of the food, we want to get the food in, and now we can actually start styling it with the data inside there. So first we need to get a navigation link, which will take us to the edit view. And for now, since we did not actually create that yet, we're going to type in destination. It's going to be a text view with a string and some interpolation for the food.calories. Then we can go ahead and remove the label and open up a closure, because we're going to just create a big label, which is going to consist of an H stack, which will consist of a V stack with the alignment of dot leading and the spacing of 6. Then we're going to have some text of food.name, exclamation mark, and it's going to be dot bold. And right below that, still remaining inside the V stack, we want to go ahead and type in text / string interpolation, and we want to get the integer of the food.calories plus another text view. So we can add some special effects of the word of calories with a foreground color of dot red. And right below the V stack, we're going to add a spacer, and the spacer is going to push the date and time all the way to the right, so it's separated from the first two texts that we just created. So inside here, we're going to create a text field, which is going to take the calculate time since the date, and this is going to be the date of the food.date, which will never be nil, because we already specified in our data model that there's going to be a default value no matter what happens, and that this should just never happen. There's no way it should happen. So we're going to force unwrap that, and we're going to type in foreground color is going to equal dot gray, and we're going to make it italic. Now on the for each loop, we want to go ahead and create an on delete, and we're going to perform delete food. And just to make it happy, we're going to go ahead and create this function immediately, private function delete food, which is going to require some offsets, and we're going to get the index set. And we'll just add a pass in here. Of course, we need to fix this later so we can swipe to delete at the correct position, but we'll get to that as soon as we're done with the UI for the content view. Now, for the list, we want to actually convert that to a plain list. So we're going to type in list style, and that's going to be .plain, because the default list is going to have a horizontal padding and it's going to be quite small in the center of your screen, but we want the list style to expand to cover all of the screen. So we're going to use that. And if we run our program now, we should see things starting to come together. As you can see, the iCalories is over here and the calorie count is right below. Now we're just missing the items to actually populate the list with. And we're going to be using a toolbar for that. So let's go ahead and add this toolbar and add our very first food items. So under the navigation title, we can go ahead and type in toolbar, and it's going to take a toolbar item. And the first one is going to have a placement of .navigation bar trailing. And the button is going to trigger the showing AddView .toggle with a label of label, and we're going to call it add food with a system image of +.circle. And we're also going to add a toolbar item with a placement of .navigation bar leading. And this is going to take an edit button, which is a very easy view to add, which helps us edit all the views at once just by clicking a simple button. We're so lucky to have this in SwiftUI, so I recommend you just throw it in there. And under the toolbar, we want to go ahead and present the sheet, which takes is presented. And that's going to be set to our showing add view. And inside here, we just add the AddFoodView. And finally, we're going to type in .navigation view style, and we're going to specify that this is stack. And this is actually more for iPad because I was testing this out on my iPad, and usually on iPad you have a sidebar, and specifying that it's .stack just makes sure that it's not going to have that sidebar, which I believe makes sense because it's a single view app. But now we can go ahead and run this, and you should be able to see that we can add stuff to our list. And we can say, for example, melon, and we can set the calorie count to 410. And when you come back to the app, you're going to notice melon. Although I'm not really impressed with the spacing over here, and there's a very simple reason for that. And that's because we forgot to add a space right here on calories. Now let's rerun that program, just to also show you that the data has persisted. So as you can see, the data has persisted. Even if we reloaded the app, the melon is still there. And when we click on it, it's going to take us to the calorie count, which of course we're going to replace with an edit view. But there's only one problem at the moment, and that is that we can't delete this because, I mean, it's going to disappear, but it's not really going to disappear. So we're going to have to update the code at the bottom to first delete the food and also to calculate the total calories of the day. So to delete the food is straightforward, and this should be the same in almost any program you make. So first we're going to add a with animation, and you don't have to do that, it just makes sure there's some sort of animation when you delete. And we can go ahead and type in offsets.map, and we want to map the food to the current position. And then dot for each managed objects dot delete. So once it finds that object, it's going to delete it. And we need to call our DataController and trigger the save function with the context of managed object context. So now it will permanently delete it at the index that we deleted it at, and it's going to save it so that we make sure that it's actually deleted. And finally, let's go ahead and fix the total calorie count. So inside here, to start, we're going to type in var calories today. It's going to be of type double, and it's going to equal 0 initially. Then for item in food, if calendar food.current.isDateInToday, and I was absolutely shocked that this was actually a function. I was so happy to see it, that you can just check if something's inside a date. It's so nice that it exists already, so you don't have to manually do that. But inside here, we'll type in item.date, which is never nil, so force unwrapped. So if it's inside that date, we're going to add the calories today with that item. So item.calories. Then at the end of this loop, we're just going to return the calories of today. Now we can go ahead and rerun this project. And at the top, you should see the calories of today, which are 410. And to verify that this works, we can go ahead and type in banana and add 490 calories. And it's going to add them together to the calories of today. Now let's go ahead and try to delete one of these items, such as the banana, because this is wrong. And you'll notice that it's going to stay there. And we can also do it with the edit button. We can just click on that and it's going to delete the item. So we have a lot of functionality there. All we're missing is the EditFoodView. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So inside views, go ahead and hold Command+N to create a new SwiftUI view. And this is going to be called EditFoodView. And click on Create. Now we're going to go directly to our AddFoodView because we want to copy this part up here, so we don't have to rewrite that, and insert it immediately inside there. Now we want to refer to each food, so we're going to go ahead and type in var food, which is going to be of fetched results of type food.element. So that has to be required for each EditFoodView so that we can edit it. And inside here, it's going to be almost exactly the same as our AddFoodView with some very slight changes. And we're also going to remove the preview for this, so we don't have to worry about that. So addState private var name is going to equal quotation marks, and addState private var calories is going to be of type double and equal to 0. Now inside here, we can go ahead and create a form with a section, and inside the section, we're going to add a text field. And the very first thing inside here we have to type in is food.name, and we need to force unwrap that. And the text is going to be bound to the name. And with the onUp here, we can perform something that's going to happen as soon as this view loads. So inside here, we're going to provide the name with the food.name, and we're going to provide the calories, which is going to equal to the food.calories, so that the data from our fetched food request will load inside here with the data that we had from earlier, so that the user can continue from where they left off. Then below, we're going to add a vstack with the text of calories and a backslash with the integer value of the calories, and a slider with the value bound to the calories in 0 to 1000, step 10. And this will also have a padding. And so far it was nearly exactly identical as the previous one. So all that's left to do is to add that centered button, so hstack, and it's going to take a spacer, or actually 2 spaces, and a button in the center, which of course is going to say submit. And don't forget to add these parentheses to the padding, or else it's going to give you a random error. And let's get back to this button. So in button, type in DataController .editFood, and we just need to fill this out. So the first one is the food we're referring to, followed by the name, which is just the name, and the calories, which are just the calories, and the managed object context. Then we want to go ahead and dismiss this view as well, because we are done with it as soon as we click on submit. We don't want to submit it and just stay on the same page, because that would be annoying. We want to make sure that we go back to our navigation view. So let's go ahead and run the project, because with that being done, we've actually completed everything we need to make this app function properly. Or actually, that's not true, because we forgot to go to our content view and update the navigation. So let's go all the way back here to navigation link, and instead of this text view, we're going to have to replace it with the EditFoodView, and we're going to have to pass in the food, which is the current food over here. But now we can finally go ahead and rerun this application, and we can use it freely. We can click on melon, and it's going to load the melon data. and we can change it to something such as 700 and submit it. And it's going to reset the counter, and it's also going to update the melon. But realistically, melon is more around there, let's say. And then let's go ahead and add something else like a lasagna, which will be 1,000 calories for some reason. And let's go ahead and add a banana. We can do that at 50 calories. And it's going to keep track of everything you add, kind of like a calculator, and it's going to add it to the today view with the counter to the side. Now, if we go ahead and delete that, we can go ahead and reopen this app at any time we want, and all the data is going to persist. We can also click on edit and remove something we don't like, such as lasagna, and click on delete, and it's going to disappear. Now, if we go ahead and click on banana, we can also change that to whatever we want. We can say banana cake and change that to 660. And now we're back on track with the diet. And once again, you can go ahead and exit the app at any moment and reopen it, and it's going to have the exact same data as from earlier. But anyways, guys, I know this was a long tutorial, but at the end of it, we actually managed to use core data into an application that can be very useful to some. Now, there are a lot of features that should be added to this app, such as adding some placeholders. We don't always want to guess how many calories something has. So if you can just hard code or get an API that says a banana has around 50 calories or an apple has around 20 calories, a count, so maybe they can type in 2 apples, then that's just going to help them with making this a lot easier. But there's so many things you can do with this, so I leave it up to you on how you want to improve this app. But as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.